In my work as a campaigner and researcher over the last few years, I've come into contact with some exceptional people. My enduring passion has been for an end to the nuclear age, and this has taken me from the blockade of Jabiluka as a guest of the Mirror to the heavily contaminated villages surrounding the Jadduguri uranium mine in India, where the struggle is the same. Last month, Flick and I spent the 63rd anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a guest of Mayor Akiba in Hiroshima, which has left after images that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. So tonight is dedicated to the atomic survivors, the Hibaksha, and to people like Uncle Kevin, Mitch, the Kunkas and their supporters everywhere. Our work for a world free of the curse of uranium mining, nuclear weapons and nuclear waste began on the humid morning of August 6, 1945. May we successfully conclude this work before the next Chernobyl is visited on some familiar city or Hiroshima comes home in the back of a parked van. It's dedicated to Nick and the rest of the Sea Shepherds who are gearing up for the next voyage to Antarctica to stay the harpoons on behalf of our ecological cousins, the great whales. It's dedicated to the crew camped in the Weld Valley tonight, in East Gippsland and Chester Forest in the wild southwest, who have pledged to silence the chainsaws that are still hacking into our country's precious native forests, our irreplaceable carbon banks. It's dedicated to those who stood up against the Burmese military a year ago this week in pursuit of democracy in their country, and their supporters and family members here in Australia who remind us to never take our democratic safeguards for granted. And it is dedicated to the new generation of young activists who held Australia's first camp for climate action in the coal terminals of Newcastle in July. They are acting because of our failure to act, and they are doing so with such powerful grace and good humour that it is impossible not to be inspired by their clarity of purpose. These young Australians are your sons and daughters, and they must be heard. They are from the same lineage as the people who raised the Southern Cross over the goldfields of Victoria or stood up for land rights, an end to the carnage in Vietnam, the right to organise collectively in the workplace, and for every woman's right to vote. Rather than reflexively setting our security forces against them, tapping their phones, vilifying them in the media, or playing out all the other rituals of state intimidation, I urge the government to pause and reflect on their message of collective survival. Please don't baton charge the messenger. Many of the people who do this work are tired of fighting against poorly conceived mega proposals, toxic developments and wars one after another. It's exhausting work, and even when you win, often all you have to show for your efforts is the absence of something awful. At our campaign launch last year, I recalled an allegory that I'd read of a group of washerwomen on a riverbank who noticed a young child floating past, clearly in trouble. They wade in and managed to rescue the child. But then they notice another, and they save that one too. And then another floats by, and another, and soon they're struggling to cope. Finally, one of the women throws up her hands and retreats from the riverbank. The others panic. "We need you here, comrade. Where are you going?" Without breaking stride, she replies, "I'm going to find whoever it is who's throwing them in." It is up to every one of us to keep rescuing the children, but we also need to figure out what it is we're doing collectively that's putting them in harm's way in such great numbers. Millions of us marched to prevent harm coming to the children of Iraq. Starting here in Australia on the 15th of February 2003, millions of people around the globe in more than 800 cities warned against going to war in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that weren't there. George Bush called us a focus group. In fact, it was the largest protest in world history, and history has proven us right. What we need is a mass destruction of weapons. The Iraq War must teach us this lesson and can become the exit strategy from war itself. This year, the world will spend $1.3 trillion on narrow-minded military security in the pursuit of ever more efficient and deadly forms of state-sanctioned violence. Australia's contribution to this willful theft from those who hunger and are not fed, as President Eisenhower put it, is $62 million a day, according to forward estimates, and this is feeding back predictably into regional arms races. You don't have to be a pacifist to recognise that this is a pathological and tragic misallocation of resources that can't be allowed to continue. We need those resources to buy climate change mitigation and adaptation, to build sustainable cities, to close the gap, and to bring about the transition to a world where this vast infrastructure of collective insecurity will be obsolete. As a society, we have inherited an interlocking set of crises that were set in motion long before any of us were born. Climate change was not caused by people in this parliament. Peak oil is manifestly not the fault of anyone sitting here tonight, but a failure to act decisively, given the stark evidence piling up all around us, is no longer excusable. There are so many signs of hope. The apology in February lifted the spirits of the whole nation. The Prime Minister's Commission on Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament is a truly welcome initiative. This country is overflowing with good ideas and a willingness to get on with this great work, but people are looking to this House for a sign that the political will exists to harness our national and global collective intelligence. I'm starting my time in here on the assumption that every one of us in this building wants the best for our families and friends, wants to serve the community, and wants to pass the place on to our kids in better condition than we found it. We know that the media dines out on the spectacle of conflict and abuse which our Westminster system seems to imply, but in my very short time here it's already apparent that a vast amount of what the Senate does is based on collaboration, hard work, and a certain grudging respect for different points of view. Mr. President, in the time that it has taken me to deliver this speech, 3,000 children were born into the human family, 300,000 tonnes of greenhouse pollution were injected into the warming air, and $51 million was wasted on global military spending. We only have a short time to set our house in order and bring these priorities into balance. I realise that it's an exceptionally rare thing to have the undivided attention of this room. I thank you for that. And I really look forward to working with you as we bring our collective efforts, wisdom and good grace to bear on the challenges which confront us all. Thank you.